we do have to, address the elephant in the room, essentially. Last weekend may have been one of the more, I'll say it, at least in my lifetime, kind of black eyes for the Kentucky Derby. And it's been a very odd situation going down at Churchill. Last time we spoke, I believe we were talking about 3 or 4 horses having to, unfortunately, that passed away on the track. Well, it continued into the weekend. It finished at last count, and this was just Saturday. It was 7. Unfortunately, a horse had to be put down in the Pat Day Mile, which of course was on Derby Day as well. Wasn't, of course, the Kentucky Derby. And then I think it all kind of ballooned. I know, Raider Jim, I know I caught you off guard. I was caught off guard about 3 hours before the race. I figured, okay, it's time to take a look and see how the odds are doing. And all of a sudden, Angel of Empire is the favorite. And I went, what's going on? Well, unfortunately, Forte, a small bruise on the hoof. And the connections ended up pulling their horse out. It ended up being 4 or 5 horses ended up scratching in total. We actually had all 3 of the alternates running, and it was still only 18 horses. Very interesting situation when it was all said and done, but might have actually been even less than that now that I think about it. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the situation at Churchill last week, where it seemed like bad news was essentially not only coming every hour or every day, but almost every race, it seemed like?
What a terrible, terrible travesty this is. And, I understand accidents are going to happen. We had the Hamlin injury last year in the NFL. Random thing, gentleman gets hit. You have the concussion protocols that are finally getting closer to front and center after years and decades of football players being taken out with, shoulder hits or slams to the ground. Yes, injuries are going to happen. But this is really a travesty, and where do you point the finger? Does it go to one place, 2 places? Del Mar went through this, the crown jewel of the West, the Mar Thoroughbred Club. That's Brandon First and I's hometown track. They went through this several years ago, but by gosh, they got right on it. They corrected it, and they are pretty much at 100% now. They have such a fantastic safety record. They could probably help contribute to write the book on how you do it right. What's going on at Churchill Downs? That's a very renowned track. That's in the spotlight each and every year. It's known for the running of the roses. And beyond that, Brandon and I talked at length about the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act that was passed back in, I believe it was 20. I had brought to the show one time about the conversation I had with Representative Congressman Paul Tonko's communications director, Matt Sonnenberg, at the time. And he had a great conversation with me about why it was there, what was going to happen. And at that time, they were still waiting for it to go to the House and be passed, which it was a few months later. But where is this Safety and Integrity Act? Where is this committee? I reached out to the congressman's current communications director, or at least listed as the current communications director. I'm still waiting for a response. I'm hoping they will not only have a discussion with me, but might be willing to go on Zoom and we can record their statements. Because I even saw the mention of this committee today with respect to, I believe it was Churchill Downs. But something has to happen, because here's what I don't understand. It was my understanding this Integrity and Safety Act was going to be like the Bible from East Coast to West Coast. This is what all the tracks are going to follow. Here's where there's already a law in the system or in the theory. Joseph Saffie Jr., 2 of his entries were the ones that were taken down Derby week. And due to that, they scratched his entry that was going into run in the Derby. Saffie Joseph Jr. is then suspended indefinitely at Churchill Downs. Sounds like, they're taking it serious until you read this week's racing programs, and he's got entries at Gulfstream. So what's going on? I just don't understand. Robertino Diadorno suspended for 30 days at Oaklawn, but his 15 days of that are going to be stayed. Oaklawn's done. They got done running in May. So he's going to have a 15-day suspension when the next Oaklawn session starts, which is not until December 8th. He's going to be out December 8th through the 15th. And then as long as everything is clear for 1 year, from May 15th, 23 to May 15th, 24, that's it. Those are the 15 days, and no harm, no foul. And I just don't understand.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the lack of uniformity.
Exactly.
It kind of reminds me of, like, if this was happening in, like, I don't know, the 20s or the 30s, where you have to pick up the phone at Churchill and call down to Gulfstream and go, hey, I don't know if you know this guy, whatever, Sappy Jr., but we have our thoughts about him. We've suspended him. Just letting you know. We live in a world where the information comes very quickly, and I think it does come down to a lack of uniformity. Like you said, you have even to the Baffert situation, and I don't want to put the Baffert situation the same breath as this, because that would be unfair to all parties involved, to be honest. But when it came to the Bob Baffert situation, there was a lot of talk about, after the Medina Spirit thing, Bob Baffert was suspended from Churchill Downs in Kentucky. But he could race, and there may have been one or two other tracks, so I don't want to say everywhere else, but I know here on the West Coast, he was essentially given the green light. My point being is, you have that Saffrey Jr. who just essentially goes, oh, I'm suspended here? Okay. We'll go to Oaklawn. We'll go to Belmont. We'll go to, Pimlico, wherever. That's fine. It's almost kind of like 9-10 strikes and you're out.
Right.
Because these guys can essentially, maybe you're going to have to sacrifice some horses because some of these connections don't want to move but most of them, hey, when you have $1 million horse, what's $10,000 moving it down south? You know what I mean? So I think in this situation, these suspensions and these penalties need to be uniform, nationwide. Really hit these guys where they hurt, because it goes both ways. Obviously, they won't be able to run their horses, and on the other side, you have the owners and breeders who are going to maybe think twice about entrusting their thoroughbred to some of these trainers in question. And once again, I'm not putting Bob Baffert in these trainers. I was just using him as an example, but it's the end of the day, it's very obvious how you have to hit these guys. And I don't mean physically, but where you have to get them, and it's in the wallet. You have to go after their money or their ability to make money. If everything is on the up and up, I'm not just saying go indiscriminately, but that's the way to do it. These kind of slaps on the wrist when you have 15 wrists, essentially. It's like getting spanked by your mom, but you have $3 to get spanked, and you go, okay, I'm just going to, put my nerves on this. But that's exactly what it is. It's very frustrating. And especially considering we've seen over the past 3 years, this safety act, that this is the time, right? This is the bat signal is in the air. Where is Batman?
Right. And going back to one of the ones you brought up, now this is interesting, and I don't like to be the person I'm not spinning conspiracy. I'm talking back here. May 11, Todd Fletcher. I like Todd Fletcher. He's one of my favorite trainers out there. Todd Fletcher suspended for 10 days for a positive drug test result on Derby hopeful Forte. Now, those test results were from a race run September 5th, the Hopeful Stakes. DQ'd after winning the race, had to return the prize money. But it's kind of odd that with that suspension coming up on the 11th, all of a sudden Forte gets pulled the morning of the Derby, and it's because he's got a bruise. Is it because he had a bruise, or is it because they were going to find out after he crossed the finish line that, guess what, it's going to be a situation from, what was it, 2020?
Yeah. Might have been a year before. Might have been 2019. I think it was pre-COVID. That's how I judge everything these days. But I'm almost positive it was 2019 maximum security Derby.
Right. And again, was this a very flagrant thing? No, except that the reason for the suspension is the drug that they found is meloxicam. Now, meloxicam is kind of like a giant Alka-Seltzer, if you will. That's a very, very wrong and elementary way to put it, but it's they call it milkshaking. So you give this to a horse so that there won't be as big of a buildup in it, and they can get some relief from that, because otherwise, inside the stomach of a horse, if there's too much in there, then what they have stress and fatigue on the muscles. But at the same time, they want that to be taken care of naturally, especially before a race. You don't want to give anybody the upper hand, and it is a drug that in North American horse racing, it is absolutely no tolerance. It's a non-steroidal drug, but it's a no tolerance drug. Do not, for any reason, use this. You can use it in Europe, you can use it other places, but you can't use it here. So to have something like that come up, wow. And again, I think the fine was $1,000 and a 10-day suspension.
I mean, that's asking me to give you a quarter and take half the day. That's a vacation for me at that point. I mean,
Wow. And it's not taking him out of other tracks. I believe this was just in New York. So, he's probably not running at Belmont right now. I don't believe he had any entries at Pimlico this coming weekend. But again, you can't take it serious. And the more it is a situation where you can't take it serious, or you don't see that it's being taken seriously by those people who have been put in charge of the committee, guess what? You're going to have those activists out there, and pretty soon the heat on the horse racing industry is going to be big.
Which, if it continues on this track, I got to say, I mean, it would be deserved. We might be the ones out there holding up a sign if it gets too bad, because it does get to a tipping point where, like we said, this is what the committee is hopefully going to be looking for. Things like this, and maybe even get ahead of it. Obviously, the Pletcher situation, the Pletcher Forte, that's hard to not kind of go down that path, because, a hoof bruise is obviously, they took the precaution that needed to be done, but, I'm sure most trainers will say, look, if Forte's running the Belmont for the Triple Crown, they're probably running him with a bruised hoof. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm just pointing out the facts. So that is something that you do have to wonder. And that would be by far, or at least on par with Bob Baffert in terms of the most high, biggest name that has, essentially been suspended. So we'll see
I just imagine Baffert reading all these different stories and just sitting back with a cup of coffee going, you don't say.
Yeah. How about that? Huh. But yeah, it's very unfortunate, and hopefully this will be the last time that at least one of the few times we will talk about it. We don't want to talk about this subject, but if we're talking horse racing, we have to talk about this because, unlike some people, these animals are commodities. We really do love these horses, and we love their athleticism, because that's what they are. And we want to make sure that someone is there to kind of represent them, and hopefully they will be represented at the right time in the future.